For more on the win over Clemson, let's bring in former Buckeye Joshua Perry. You now see him as an analyst on the Big Ten Network. Joshua, your reaction, first off, I think we understood Ohio State could win this game. We all believed they could win, but your reaction to the way they won in the Sugar Bowl.
It was emphatic, and you felt like they really wanted to prove who they were as a team, and it started with last year's game, right? They go in there, they feel like they're very competitive. They feel like they probably should have won the game had they gotten a couple of breaks to go their way, and it didn't go like that. And Ryan Day talked about it. Justin Fields talked about it. A lot of the players on the defense, Jonathan Cooper, talked about it, but it was 365 days of having to relive that moment, and the posters being up in the weight room and in the locker room with the score of the game on there, just as a reminder to those players. So they wanted to go out there and prove that they belonged last year and that they probably should have won last year. But then you add in Dabo Swinney in the lead up to the game, talking about how Ohio State was only the 11th best team in the country and that his preparation was going to be easier because they only had 6 games of tape to look at, and all of those different things that play in there. And players internalize that kind of stuff. Like when you're going into these big games, everybody's preparing hard, but motivation is a huge factor. And any type of edge that you can gain, you're going to use it to your advantage. And that's exactly what Ohio State did. And so we saw them. You felt like it was a winnable game. You felt like Clemson was going to be a tough opponent, but it was really the motivation factor that put Ohio State over the top.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about this. There's so much to unpack. I'm glad we've got you for some time because the motivation, chip on the shoulder, the revenge, it's all stuff that we in the media love talking about. It's juicy content, okay? But you say there's a real thing there because sometimes I think, yeah, but when you line up, you still got to be better, faster, more, you know what I mean? So you think there's a real thing there to the chip on the shoulder storyline?
Yeah, I mean, you just play with a little bit more edge, and people try to manufacture it. Like you see Nick Saban all the time. Like he'll try to find a way to make his team an underdog when they're not. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, were really good at finding a way to manufacture some of that adversity. Urban Meyer talks about when he was at Florida, he would attribute fake quotes to Kirk Herbstreit and other analysts saying that his team wasn't good enough. And then as we were preparing for Virginia Tech in 2015, there were fake quotes from some of their defensive backs that were put in the wide receiver room. And it's to create that edge, and it makes you prepare harder, number one, which is really important when you're coming into these games, making sure that you're on top of everything you're supposed to be on top of, because it's not a familiar opponent. Like preparing for Penn State or Michigan State is different than preparing for Clemson because you don't see them very often. But then once you get between the lines, you finish a little bit better and you chase a little bit harder on defense and you finish your block a little bit better on the offensive line. And so it's just finding any of those opportunities to where you can create an advantage that's hidden within the game. Like you look at some of the positional matchups and you say, okay, we've got better chess pieces than them, but what's the hidden advantage within that matchup? Like, can I get my guy to be angry at that defensive back, even though he shouldn't be, and maybe he breaks off that route a little bit cleaner and gets open? That's what coaches are always looking for, and Dabo Swinney really just gave it to him.
And the other thing, you mentioned Dabo Swinney. Let's go here because there is nothing more tribalistic, including politics, nothing more tribalistic than college football. Everyone thinks your head coach is a saint and every other head coach is a dirty lying cheater. And it's amazing to me, the story of Dabo, who went from aw shucks, squeaky good boy 5 years ago to now. I feel like he was melting down, Joshua. He doubled down after the game about the 11th rank. To me, he has mismanaged the last 10 days. He hurt his team more than he helped him. That's my take.
Yeah, I think he mismanaged 2020 in a lot of ways. Like it's been very revealing with some of the quotes that have come out on a number of issues. And 2020 has been a trying year for a lot of reasons, and I think it's exposed a lot of people's character. But you can even go back to some of the coronavirus takes that he had. You can go back to some of the things that happened within their program and some of the takes he had in terms of racial justice. Even when it comes to name, image, and likeness, Dabo has been on the wrong side of that conversation. And so it's no surprise. It's his character to be on the wrong side of a lot of conversations. But to your point, in the post game, he had a legitimate opportunity to say, I don't necessarily regret ranking Ohio State at 11, but it became a distraction for my team, and I regret being a distraction. And instead, he doubled down. And I think that's the thing about Dabo that stands out to me is the lack of humility. And you're right. He was the aw shucks guy. He's very folksy. He could relate to people. You felt like he was just another guy who became a big time coach. And he's reached the pinnacle of college football and really revealed that his character is not very different than a lot of these other coaches who have reached a lot of success. And the lack of humility is the part that stands out the most. And here we are. Like that was one of the reasons why I enjoyed the victory so much, is because part of it is you've never beaten Clemson. The other part of it is I don't like their coach very much. So it feels good to me because now I can talk smack on Twitter.
And I want to ask you, on the flip side, you have Ryan Day now. So let's say Joshua Perry is coming out as a 17-year-old Olentangy kid. You have Ryan Day, you have Dabo Swinney. How do you feel about the direction of your program under Ryan Day?
It's great. It's great. And I think there's a difference. Like I talked about the lack of humility for Dabo. The other thing with him is you feel like he's not necessarily genuine, because he definitely did a flip-flop on his position of whether a team who played 6 games should be in, where Ryan Day has kept the same tone since this thing has started. He's kept a very even tone when it comes to talking about all of the issues coming along with the season. You just feel like he puts his heart out there in a way that it invites young people into the program. And you see it in recruiting. And Dabo recruits really well too. And he's able to connect with the guys that he wants to get. But Ryan Day is able to go into any community, anywhere in America, and really just open up his chest to young people. And they feel that and they connect with that. And I think that more than anything, recruits are smart because they spend so much time around coaches that they start to understand when a guy is just trying to, blow smoke, and when somebody's being real with them, and you feel nothing but realness from Ryan Day.
Let's talk about Justin Fields, because in the annals of Ohio State history, this has got to be a top 5 performance. To be banged up the way he was, got some sort of cocktail, comes out slinging 60-yard bombs. I mean, that performance, Joshua, to me is an all-timer from a gutsy standpoint.
Yeah, it was extremely gutsy. And we've seen Justin Fields do it before, though. Michigan game in 2019, where he went out and comes right back and throws a bomb to, I think it was Garrett Wilson for a touchdown. It was the same thing. Comes in, throws a pass to Chris Olave in the end zone for a touchdown. And you could see the amount of pain that he was in. But the thing that stood out to me was the conversation that he had with Ryan Day. When Ryan said, "Are you able to go?" He said, "I don't have any other choice." And what that meant was he was going to be there for his team regardless. And for a guy who's going to be a top 5 draft pick, for him to make the decision to go back out there and put his body back on the line, I think is a really huge deal. I think it shows a commitment. I think it shows how much all of this means to guys in that locker room. But then you really start to look at it, and you could, like I said, visible pain. The play didn't drop. You could say that the play actually elevated from the point that he was struck like that. And it's something within Justin Fields. There's a burning passion and desire for greatness. And it started off with everybody saying that, oh man, maybe Justin fell off because the 2 best opponents they played, he didn't perform very well. And then he's like, all right, well, I'm going to come out early on, perform well, and then I'm going to get busted up and come back out there and say it doesn't matter because I'm a tough guy and I can fight through it.
We're going to talk about Alabama next week on the show. So let's do one more on last night. I'll get you out on this one. Have you ever seen a story like this where Trey Sermon goes from a guy who looks like he shouldn't even be on the field to diet Derrick Henry? I mean, the stuff he's done over the last couple of games, that guy didn't look like he should even get more than 5 carries a game in weeks 2, 3, and 4.
It was really interesting to see that too. And from having conversations with people around the program, part of it was him being banged up. The other part of it was him really adjusting to the system at Ohio State and playing Big Ten football. It's very different in the conference that he came from because, they lack defense there. And so he had to adjust his mentality to the physicality and the type of defense that was played in the Big Ten. And he absolutely did it. And you give a guy like Trey Sermon a ton of credit because of the value to the team. Like when he was needed the most, he stepped up the most. And it takes a special player to understand the moment and to be able to seize it like that. It's also really fun just watching these guys kind of peak at the right time. And again, it kind of goes back to that conversation about, did they play enough games? Do we really know who they are? And you feel like, well, 7 games in, it's looking like a team that can beat just about anybody. And I'm getting ready to dive into the Alabama tape, but you feel like they've got a legitimate shot at those guys because Alabama struggles on defense in certain aspects. And so I'm super excited, but Trey Sermon, it's a heck of a story. You can tell the guy's worked his tail off and he means a lot to the team.